Teenagers are influenced by many people, but most consistently by their parents. Barna research tells us that 78% of teens say that their parents have a lot of influence over their life. In the area of spiritual influence, parents were again by far the leading influence. And regarding dads, 39% said they are emotionally very close to their father, while sadly, 9% say they are not at all close to their dads. How can we become better dads? Today we will visit with two Christian counselors that are also parents. I'm Pastor Minner Labrador. Welcome to Old Man, New Man. I'm so happy to have Omar and Lisa here with us, two counselors that can help us through this question of how to bring up kids to love God and to be respectful. Parenting, the big job that never really ends. Lisa, how many children do you have?
I have three. I have twins that are 10, and I have an oldest child who's 13.
Do your counseling skills come in handy with your children?
I've used the counseling more often the last few years on my own children than I did in counseling.
Okay. How about you, Omar? How many do you have?
I have two. I have a 7-year-old and a 3-year-old.
Okay. So my kids are mine is 21, my oldest, and 17 is my second. Mm-hmm. How do we parent kids in an age and culture where television, programs, and even the mentality in schools with low emphasis on values, on family, how do we rear God-like children?
My focus needs to be first on just connecting with God. If I don't connect with Him and understand and fear Him, not necessarily be afraid of Him, but to respect Him, then I can't get the energy and the power to do anything else.
So a relationship with God is what you think is the number one point. Mm-hmm. Now, how would that affect my relationship with my kids, whether I have a relationship with God or not? Does that make a difference?
Well, I think that it gives support to the ethics and the different things that we're trying to teach our kids. Because if we just speak off the cuff, there is nothing grounded in it. There's no basis for it. Whereas if we come from a Christian perspective, then we've got God behind us.
Right. Yeah.
Well, one of the things that Evelyn shares with me that I really value is the fact that when I accepted Christ, when I became a new man, I was about 25 years old or so. In accepting Christ, she says that I became a better husband and a better father when I accepted the Lord. So love for God is number one. He kind of anchors us, puts us on focus, and kids are on loan from Him anyway. I mean, our children belong to Him ultimately. Mm-hmm. And so how do you start? Number one, have a relationship with God. Jacob, one of my favorite stories in Genesis 48, when he was about to bless Ephraim and Manasseh, who were Joseph's sons, one of the things he shared with them was his testimony of how God had blessed him. So he had a relationship with God that he passed on to his children and grandchildren. A legacy of sorts.
Yes, that's so important to be able to share not your opinion, but God's opinion. Because my opinions may change and based upon my moods. But God never changes, and so when I connect with Him, He gives me, through His Holy Spirit, gives me the power to be able to be a godly parent. And it's not easy. It's very difficult. Very, very difficult to do.
And so with His help, we can do it. Mm-hmm. And so love God. The second point that you were bringing out was loving your spouse. Loving your spouse. Why is that so important for children to see the father loving his spouse or vice versa?
Children are the family is a microcosm of society, of the community. So if children learn to see a father love the mother and a mother love the father, they're more likely to themselves be loving parents and loving spouses to one another. So it's really, I can really damage 3 generations. I can damage my own generation, my children, and my grandchildren with my behavior, or I can bless 3 generations with what I do. So it's a very powerful thing for my children to see that I love my spouse, and sometimes when my daughter sometimes gets disrespectful to my wife, I'll say, please don't speak to my wife that way. That's my wife that you're speaking to. And it kind of takes her aback, but she understands that, hey, I can't speak to mom that way because that's daddy's wife. It's serious business we're talking about.
But in our culture today, with so many families breaking up, it's so often the fact that the man will talk about his wife in a negative way in front of the children, or she will in front of the children. It's hard for me personally to imagine, because I saw my father treating my mother well, but just to imagine as a child to see my dad talking bad about my mom, and if I look up to him, then it just destroys my whole foundation.
Right.
So in other words, don't slam your wife or your husband in front of your children. Don't slam it at all.
Right.
I mean,
Right.
you don't want to do it when they're not around either, right?
Right.
But the kids also learn from our example. I know we're going to talk about that a little bit later, but if they role model what they see. And my father always told me when I was dating, look at how they treat their mother, because that gives you an indication of how they're going to treat their spouse.
That's right.
And it's true, absolutely.
So the way we treat our spouse, very important in parenting. Kids are always watching us. Have you heard that song, that country song that I really like? I think it's Rodney Atkins, Little Buckaroo, I've Been Watching You. Have you heard that song where the little boy is watching his father in everything he does? And especially our children watch us and how we treat our wives. Number 3, the third step in bringing up godly children and teaching them values is availability, being available for them. I read an amazing statistic that it said that families, men and women today, work 1,000 more hours a year than they did 25 years ago.
Oh, wow.
That availability is very limited now. How could we as parents improve on that?
I'll spend time with them.
Right.
Time is the biggest
Right.
thing. There's the love languages, and one of the love languages is just spending time with them. Kids really realize that they are important if you put your other stuff aside. They know you've got lots to do. They know you have lots of responsibilities. But if you take time out from that schedule and you spend time with them, I spend every night tucking my kids in. As old as they are, I still tuck them in. And Mommy, stay, let's talk. What do you want to talk about? I don't know, let's just talk. And that's special bonding time as well with them that are important.
Well, one of the things I heard, and it was great impact to me in my life, was to a child, love is spelled T-I-M-E.
That's right.
And so that time that we spend with them, as you do, tucking them in and having a conversation, interacting with them, does wonders for their value and self-esteem as well.
Yeah, and we need to be careful when we spend quality time with our kids, that we bought into this lie in the culture that we think, well, quantity is just as important as quality. So if I spend 5 minutes with them, it's quality though. I've turned the cell phone off. But if you went to a restaurant and they gave you this teeny little slice of something, had the best ingredients, it was really good, and you said, I want more, and you're like, well, you know what? It was good and it was small, but at least you had something. That's a lie. Kids want our time. So 5 to 7 minutes a day, that's not sufficient to spend with your kids. You need to be doing things with them, and when you make sure that you do stuff with your kids, make sure that it's stuff that they enjoy doing, not what Daddy wants to do. I love to read books, and so my daughter says to me, I said, baby, what do you want to do? She says, anything you want to do but read books. So she knows already that that's my preference. And so I have to really force myself to do stuff she wants to do. She's an active 7-year-old girl, so she wants to go out and ride the bike or do whatever. And I have to get into her world. It's my responsibility as a parent.
You go into their world to be an effective parent.
Not expect her to come into mine.
And I think it's really good. One of the statistics that they also say is that kids get their self-esteem from their opposite sex parent. And how often are we raising women with all kinds of self-esteem issues because daddy has not been home? You know, and the mother's usually been the caretaker, so that the men's self-esteem are higher than women statistically. And this is a perfect opportunity for us to change that chain.
John Eldredge, in his book Wild at Heart, talks a lot about that. He calls it validation, and how the father can validate the self-esteem of the children. It goes both ways, but dads often disconnect and just observe. But again, I just want to emphasize to the new men that are walking in Christ to make the effort to communicate to their children what they love about them.
Right.
And I found that with kids, it's also meaningful to have, at least with my boys, little names for them. You know, like a little tiger, you know, a little lion, or he's tough, he's, you know, and to interact with them. And I would also take them on trips with me when I would go out. So, as you say, you go into their world, and I know that I bring them into mine, and just being together.
That's the key.
Yeah, that TIME.
We do this thing, we do a date night, and I take a different boy, or I go shopping or do something, the girl night with my daughter. So we have time that a couple times a month, I will go and I'll take one child, and we'll go, and you're going on a date with mommy. And so they go,
fantastic.
which is really, they love that, because they have your undivided attention. You know, if you've got how many ever kids you have, to give them your undivided attention.
And that also
really
teaches
important.
them how to appreciate respect and courtesy, so that when they're older and begin dating, they know how to be treated, you know, as a lady. A man knows how to treat a lady, you know. And
I love it when my 12-year-old opens the door for me. You know, and I love that.
He needs to keep that going.
Absolutely.
That's right. That's right.
And so being available is the number 3 point that you mentioned. The other point we want to talk about for a few minutes is respect. Why should you respect a 3-year-old?
Because they learn by watching you. And if they don't feel your respect, then they're going to grow up thinking that they need to get respect any way that they can. And that's when you find sometimes when children are, when they haven't been treated with respect, sometimes they become violent individuals. You know, I was speaking with a 12-year-old who was in the Regional Youth Detention Center. He was there for several months because he was carrying a gun. And I said, why do you carry that gun? He said, that gun's not for protection, that's for respect. And I thought that was interesting, and I said, so you feel that no one will respect you if you don't carry a firearm? And he said, yeah. He said, so respect equaled fear to him. Well, he had grown up in a very abusive, you know, verbally and physically abusive relationship with his father and his mother, and so that's all he knew. So you try to respect your children as much as you can, and give them, to me, respect is not just what I say, it's what I do as well. I try to give them as many choices as I can.
What about like the common courtesies of everyday life? Saying please, or thank you, or you're welcome. Why should a parent say thank you to the child? You mentioned observation and learning by observation. But why else? I mean, a 2-year-old? Some folks don't understand that.
Well, we go back to the golden rule. You know, I treat that person like I want to be treated. Plus, they're learning from me.
Modeling.
Exactly. I want them to grow up. If they have respect that's served to them, they're going to serve respect to other people.
I saw something interesting not long ago where just an infant child, he couldn't even talk yet, but his mother had taught him how to say please in sign language. And so when he wanted something, he would request in please, and he would express thank you. And just little tiny things, even at such an early age. Because what we teach them at that young age often is what we get later.
The respect carries on. You know, they started out, you know, the old adage, train up a child the way it shall go and he will not depart from it. You know, that's the truth, because if we teach them how to respect If we respect them, then they respect others, and authority in general. The teachers will thank you. You know, their wives, the people they work with will thank you, because that is the way you're training them to go.
And so in order to expect that from them, we show it and model it to them as individuals. Okay. So we have that with respect. Now, the next point, some folks would have a hard time with, but this is over and over. I've seen this in parenting manuals and books and seminars, and that is to allow the children to express their emotions and their thoughts. Wow. Tell us about that one.
Well, you shouldn't bottle up your emotions. We shouldn't train our kids to bottle all that up and then for it to explode, whether it be joy or anger.
So that goes for little boys.
Absolutely.
I mean, get it out.
Especially for little boys.
Get it out. Talk about it.
Appropriately. You know, there's nothing wrong with anger. It's what you do with it that makes it right or wrong. And that's what we need to be training them from the get-go. You know, it's okay to be angry, but it's not okay to throw your toys. You know, there's a respect area there as well.
Right. So you're teaching as it goes along.
Yeah, and what you find is then there's a high degree of correlation between a family that there are these unwritten rules where people aren't allowed to feel, they're not allowed to speak, they're not allowed to verbalize their feelings. There's a high correlation of addictions with that, because that's their coping skill. You know, that they can't get it out. And I have a lot of clients who say, you know, I grew up in a family where my father told me, if I want your opinion, I'll give it to you, or I want you to be seen and not heard. They just couldn't
shut it down.
Yeah, any verbalization of any feelings was seen as disrespect, and that happens in some cultures. Sometimes it happens in the Hispanic cultures, or even in the African American culture, where even if it's appropriate, that parent will see it as disrespectful, and so that child learns. Guess what? You know, talking about emotions, especially for guys, it's not safe, so they just push it down. It's a coping skill. And then what you push down comes out in other areas. It comes out in anger management, it comes out in addictions, it comes out in lack of communication skills. It will come out somehow.
For example, I saw the situation with a little boy that wanted to be selected on a baseball team, and he wasn't. His name was Johnny, and he wanted to be picked on a team. And so when he wasn't picked, so when he was walking away with his father, he's filled with anger, and he's kicking up dirt. So his father asked him, what are you feeling? He says, I want to beat him up, the guy that selected the team. But then his father took the time to sit with him and to talk with him. And just listening to Johnny, he figured out, helped Johnny learn that what he was feeling wasn't necessarily anger, but being hurt because he was left out. And so once he processed that, Johnny kind of gained a little bit of composure. And that was a growing moment for Johnny. But most often we would just slam it down, shut it down.
We have a responsibility as parents to help our kids acquire the tools that they're going to need to cope with life, so they can cope appropriately rather than addictions of whatever.
Well, those that don't learn those emotions, they'll certainly keep you guys busy in your counseling.
Job security.
Job security.
Unfortunately, business is booming, yeah.
So as moms and dads, we need to make an effort or allow them to express their emotions, their thoughts, and what they're feeling. And so that would help them to be more complete and be great kids.
That's right.
Now, the next point, point 6, is to be aware of observation, modeling. Children learn by observation, not information.
That's right.
You've heard so often the statement, do what I say, not what I do. But children are always watching. And I know for a fact, I have boys, so I've kind of focused a lot on boys, but, boys learn by observation. What they see me do, they'll start modeling. Have you found that to be the case with your own children and counseling?
Yeah, most definitely. Most definitely. What I find interesting, that my son, even before he could speak, would take my cell phone out of my pocket and would take my pen out of my pocket and would try to clip it to his shirt and would try to take my cell phone and stick it in his diaper, because he saw Daddy with a cell phone in his pocket and a pen in his shirt.
What he wanted to do.
It was very, very clear instance of modeling, and that's how children learn. I mean, that they do they become what they see, what they're around. That's just who they are. That's why it's so important for us parents to really be careful about what we say, how we act, what we choose to focus our time and energy on, because, our children are always watching us.
They're always studying and observing that. I keep alluding to that song. I know about Rodney Atkins, the little boy that was just, he imitated his father in anger, but then later in the song he imitated his father in prayer, because he was watching his father pray as well. And so those eyes are always on us. And so we need to be alert to that as parents.
And I think if we learn how to draw our own boundaries, it also role models boundaries for them. Boundaries is probably the biggest thing that we can teach our kids, so that they aren't susceptible to outside influences. They're more secure knowing what their boundaries are.
And then the last point that we look at for a few minutes is openness and honesty with them. So often, dads are supposed to know everything. If you listen to them, the dad has the answer. Daddy, why is the sky blue? Well, son, because. But honesty and openness, being frank with them. Have you experienced that with your children?
I have. I've also experienced it. I can't speak from a woman's point of view, but as a man, probably the most difficult time I've had being honest with my son and daughter has been when I've had to apologize.
Apologize?
Yeah. I have still, and I know that it's very, very good for the children to see that, hey, you know what? I'm important enough for my father, when he's done me wrong, when he's overstepped his boundaries and stepped on my emotional toes, to say that he's sorry. And not just for me is it important enough for me to say that I'm sorry, but what can I do to make it right? And it's interesting, a 7-year-old will come up with some creative ways to make amends for what you've done. Now my son, he throws his arms around me and he loves me and he kisses me, or my daughter pats me on the head and says, "That's okay, Daddy, I love you anyway." But my children will never learn to forgive appropriately if I don't ever learn to apologize appropriatry. And so it's a double-edged sword.
So you're going back to the modeling also, because they kind of go hand in hand.
Yeah.
I think we have to be careful with our apologies to make them real, because sometimes people use the apology as, oh, that fixes everything, and then we don't learn from that. We have to learn too. We have to learn that if we make a mistake, not to try to make that mistake again, because saying you're sorry for the same thing all the time doesn't erase what you said. The words are already out. But to come to them honestly and prayerfully and say, I'm really sorry, I screwed up, goes a long way with kids.
And they're smart. The kids are smart.
Yes, they are.
And they know when we mess up. And if we don't admit that we mess up and we just carry on, then hopefully they don't model that behavior later in their adult years as well. Apologizing, you brought that point up. I'm in my early 40s. And I shared with my father something that had hurt me when I was in my late teen years. And I'll never forget, this man of respect, the patriarch of our family, as I call him, came to me and he said, "Son, what you shared that had hurt you, I remember it, and I'm sorry." And, he did this recently.
Wow.
And so I looked at him and, honestly, I said, "Oh, that's no big deal, Dad." But inside, it was a big deal, and it meant a lot to me. So recognizing our mistakes, that openness.
Yeah, because your kids see that you're real. They don't see that you're this, this painted on, waxy person. You're a real person with real issues and real problems. And once again, you don't need to share a lot of your personal information with your kids. You need to have some appropriate boundaries. But when you screw up, you need to say, "I'm sorry. Yeah, I messed up. I'm sorry. Will you forgive me?" Or, like you said before, I just don't know. But I'll find the information out and I'll get back to you. As opposed to feeding them a line or giving them wrong information, which you don't ever want to do to your children.
Okay.
I think looking at our families in general and looking to see what kind of a family do you have. Do you have a family that's ruled by the father? Or do you have a family that's ruled by a child? Or do you have a family that's ruled by the family? Is a big difference, because if the kid feels like the world is revolving around them, that's not real. Right. That's not when they step out of that door, that's not the way life is going to treat them. Right. They need to know that this is a democracy, and that there is authority, but yet it's not.
It's a democracy that leans towards dictatorship.
Exactly. Well, no, I mean, I agree with you. And what I tell my children is I always want to hear what you have to say. You got to find the right time and the right way to say it to me. But in the end, mommy and daddy, what we say still goes. When you get older, you can make your own decisions. And we try to give them as many decisions as we can. But in the end, we're still in charge.
In Deuteronomy 11:19, we are told that God expects us to teach our children by spending time with them and talking with them. Today we covered important points about parenting. Number 1, love your God. God loves best, and when we understand how well He loves, we will reflect His type of love and will be better dads for it. Number 2, love your spouse. In loving your wife and speaking kind words about the children's mom, the children feel more secure and loved by you as a dad as they see you love and respect her. Number 3, be available. Love to a child is spelled T-I-M-E. Number 4, respect the child. Ephesians 6:4 calls the fathers to not provoke the children to anger, but to bring them up in the training and admonition of the Lord. Number 5, allow expression. Children feel valued when they're heard, and this also teaches them how healthy communication takes place. Number 6, stay alert. Remember, they're watching you. Children learn by observation far more than words. And finally, be honest and open. You don't have to be perfect or have answers for everything. But by being open and honest, the children learn to live free from unrealistic perfection. Recently, I was stopped in traffic and read a bumper sticker that was meaningful to me. It read, "It's never too late to have a happy childhood." If you've had a bad relationship with your parents, forgive them and connect with your Heavenly Father so that you can be the best dad you can. Psalm 103 says that even when my mother and father forsake me, the Lord will take me in. He's faithful and He loves you no matter what. In closing, I encourage you to always pray with and for your wife and children. Nothing speaks louder of a father's love than a father's blessing upon the home. I'm Pastor Minner Labrador. Thank you for joining us on Old Man, New Man.